The afternoon sun hung low over the quiet suburban street, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. To an outsider, this neighborhood was the picture of calm and order. Pristine houses, trimmed hedges, the faint hum of lawnmowers in the distance. But for Jasmine Moore, stepping onto her own driveway felt anything but peaceful. Today, her sense of security, her pride in the home she had worked for years to build, was being challenged in a way she never imagined. Jasmine had moved into her home 5 years earlier. A single mother and a rising professional, she had poured her heart, her savings, and her relentless energy into creating a sanctuary for herself and her teenage son. This house was more than brick and mortar. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for: dignity, independence, and the hope that her son would grow up knowing the power of perseverance. But that hope was tested when she encountered the HOA president. Karen Whitman, a woman whose name had become synonymous with entitlement in the neighborhood. Jasmine knew Karen from passing nods at community events, from curt emails over minor landscaping complaints. But nothing prepared her for the encounter that morning. Karen, impeccably dressed in a crisp white blouse and pearl earrings, blocked the driveway with an air of self-importance that could not be ignored. "Ms. Moore," Karen began, her voice sharp and precise, "I'm going to need you to leave your property. You're in violation of HOA regulations." Jasmine's eyebrows shot up. She blinked, disoriented. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Karen said, tilting her head, a patronizing smile on her face. "This property is not in compliance. I'm asking you to step aside immediately." Jasmine's heart pounded, a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief coursing through her. Step aside. Leave her own home? The audacity of this woman to wield bureaucratic power like a weapon was infuriating. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to breathe deeply. She would not be intimidated in her own home. "Karen, this is my house," Jasmine said firmly. Her voice was steady, but beneath it lay a storm of emotion. "Lived here for 5 years. I've paid my mortgage, my HOA fees, and I've complied with every rule to the best of my knowledge. You don't get to tell me to leave." Karen's smile faltered for a split second, as if Jasmine's confidence had thrown her off. But she quickly masked it, tilting her chin like a queen affronted by a mere subject. "The rules are clear," she said, "and they apply to everyone. If you refuse, I will be forced to call the authorities." The words hung in the air like a challenge, a thinly veiled threat. Jasmine's mind raced, weighing her options. The authorities. Let a stranger attempt to remove her from her own property. She couldn't let fear dictate the outcome. This was about more than rules. This was about respect, justice, and the right to exist without being policed simply for being a black woman in a predominantly white neighborhood. She squared her shoulders and stepped forward. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice now imbued with the full weight of her conviction. "I'm going to stand my ground. You may call the authorities if you like, but know that I will not be intimidated into abandoning my home." Karen's face tightened, a flicker of irritation passing over her features. She opened her mouth to retort, but before the words could form, Jasmine's phone rang. It was her lawyer, someone she had consulted after receiving prior HOA notices that she believed were unjustified. "Hello?" Jasmine said, holding the phone with a steady hand. "Ms. Moore," said the voice on the other end, calm and reassuring, "we received your message. The HOA has no legal standing to force you off your property. You have every right to remain in your home. If they escalate, document everything and we'll intervene." Jasmine's pulse began to calm. She glanced at Karen, who was now frowning, clearly realizing that her threats carried no weight. But Karen was not easily deterred. With a dismissive wave, she muttered, "This isn't over," and turned on her heel. Striding back toward her SUV, as if she had claimed some hollow victory, Jasmine watched her leave, the tension slowly ebbing from her body. She exhaled, gripping her phone tightly, her fingers trembling. Her mind replayed the confrontation, but with each repetition, she felt a quiet resolve grow stronger. She was home, and no amount of intimidation would change that. The next few days were tense. Karen sent emails, each more pointed and petty than the last, critiquing trivial aspects of Jasmine's landscaping, accusing her of minor infractions that had never been enforced against any other homeowner. Yet Jasmine responded with calm professionalism, documenting each interaction meticulously, knowing that the law and reason were on her side. Word of the confrontation began to spread through the neighborhood. Some neighbors whispered behind fences, others offered quiet support. Malik, her teenage son, noticed the change in his mother. He had seen her face the world's challenges countless times, but he had never seen her confronted so directly with prejudice disguised as authority. And yet, he saw her courage, the fire in her eyes that refused to be dimmed. Jasmine spent the evening reflecting, sitting on the front porch as the sun dipped behind the horizon. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, the distant laughter of children. Echoing down the street, she thought of her mother, who had taught her to stand tall in the face of injustice. Of the countless black women whose stories of resilience were never told in polite society. She realized that today she had added her own chapter to that legacy, not by raising her voice in anger, but by asserting her dignity with unwavering resolve, and she knew that the battle was not yet over. Karen might continue her harassment, and the HOA might attempt further intimidation. But Jasmine had discovered something invaluable in this confrontation, a profound affirmation of her right to exist fully, unapologetically and without fear. The following morning, Jasmine awoke with a clarity she had not anticipated. Today, she would not merely defend her property. She would reclaim the narrative. She scheduled a neighborhood meeting, inviting neighbors, community leaders, and a local journalist who had expressed interest in stories of discrimination and resilience. She prepared her testimony, detailing the encounter, highlighting the broader context of systemic bias that often went unnoticed in suburban enclaves. As she rehearsed her words in the quiet of her living room, she felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. This was no longer just about HOA regulations or petty grievances. This was about truth, justice, and the affirmation of dignity that every black woman deserved. No matter where she lived, Jasmine Moore was ready, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the quiet, unyielding strength that had carried her through every challenge in her life. Today, she would stand, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel small in a world that too often sought to diminish their worth. The stage was set. The neighborhood, the HOA, and even Karen herself would bear witness to a story of resilience, courage, and the undeniable power of standing in one's truth. Jasmine had faced the storm, and she was no longer just surviving. It was time to thrive. The morning of the neighborhood meeting arrived with a sense of quiet anticipation. Jasmine's heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with purpose. Today, she would not merely recount an incident. She would assert her truth, illuminate the injustice, and reclaim the dignity that had been threatened. She dressed carefully, not for appearances, but as a reflection of the respect she had for herself and for the story she was about to tell. As she approached the small community hall, she saw the familiar faces of neighbors gathered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Some offered warm smiles, while others shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to confront the tension that had silently grown in their midst. Among the crowd, Malik stood tall beside her, his eyes reflecting pride and a newfound understanding of courage. Jasmine drew strength from his presence, her son. Witnessing firsthand the power of resilience and moral conviction, Karen arrived shortly after, her entrance punctuated by an air of arrogance that seemed almost rehearsed. She smiled at a few neighbors attempting a veneer of civility, but Jasmine could see through it. Karen believed she wielded authority, yet here in this room filled with witnesses, her power was diminished. Jasmine took a deep breath, reminded herself of her purpose, and stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," Jasmine began, her voice steady, carrying across the hall. "I want to share with you an experience that challenged not only my right to live in my own home, but the very notion of respect and dignity that we should extend to each other as neighbors and human beings." She recounted the confrontation on her driveway with Karen. It's the audacity of being told to leave her own property, the thinly veiled threats, and the barrage of petty HOA complaints that followed. She spoke with clarity, emotion, and restraint, allowing the weight of each word to land in the room. She emphasized that this was not merely about rules or aesthetics. It was about bias, about assumptions made based on skin color, about the subtle and not-so-subtle ways authority can be misused to intimidate and marginalize. As she spoke, a hush fell over the room. Eyes that had once held curiosity now held empathy, understanding, and in some cases, shame. Jasmine's words struck a chord not just because they were true, but because they were spoken with dignity, courage, and undeniable authenticity. Karen shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for the community's attention to the depth of her actions. She opened her mouth to respond, but Jasmine continued, her voice unwavering. This story is not about revenge. It is about standing in one's truth, holding people accountable, and ensuring that every member of our community is treated with fairness, respect, and humanity. A neighbor stood and nodded. Jasmine, what you've experienced is unacceptable. Thank you for bringing it forward. We need to do better as a community in recognizing and addressing these injustices. Others murmured agreement. Some shared their own stories of subtle discrimination or bias, their voices creating a chorus of acknowledgement and solidarity. Karen attempted to interject, her tone defensive, but the room did not yield to her theatrics. The journalist in attendance leaned forward, taking notes, ready to amplify Jasmine's story beyond the walls of the hall. For the first time, Karen realized that her authority, her self-assured posture, her carefully curated image could not withstand the truth when spoken with courage and integrity. Jasmine felt a wave of relief, but also a profound sense of responsibility. This was bigger than a single confrontation. It was a teaching moment for the entire neighborhood, a call to examine biases, and a reminder that silence in the face of injustice allows harm to persist. She continued, speaking directly to everyone present, including Karen. We all have the power to choose respect over prejudice, to choose understanding over fear. This is a chance for our community to grow, to become a place where dignity is not optional, but expected. Karen's face hardened, but there was a flicker of realization in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, she understood that her attempts to wield power unjustly had failed not because Jasmine fought back with anger, but because she fought back with principle, preparation, and pride. The meeting concluded with a decision to review the HOA's policies and implement measures to prevent similar abuses of authority in the future. Jasmine's courage had sparked action, ensuring that no other resident would be subjected to the same harassment. Community leaders pledged to hold workshops on inclusivity and bias, creating a framework for fairness and mutual respect. Jasmine had turned a moment of personal injustice into a catalyst for systemic change. That evening, as Jasmine returned home with Malik, she felt an immense sense of triumph, not of vengeance, but of victory over fear, intimidation, and systemic prejudice. The driveway where Karen had once blocked her path now felt like a symbol of triumph. Every brick of her home seemed to hum with affirmation. This was her space, her sanctuary, and she had defended it with honor. Malik turned to her, eyes wide with admiration. "Mom," he said softly, "I've never been prouder of you. Showed me what it really means to stand up for yourself and for what's right." Jasmine knelt, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Remember this moment, Malik," she said. "Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about moving forward despite that fear. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Today we stood up, not just for ourselves, but for every person who might one day face this kind of challenge." As they entered the house, Jasmine felt a profound peace settle over her. The confrontation with Karen and the HOA had tested her, but it had also revealed an unshakable truth. Dignity, courage, and resilience were far more powerful than intimidation or prejudice. Her home was no longer just a physical space. It was a testament to perseverance, pride, the enduring strength of Black women who refused to be silenced. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine's story began to circulate beyond the neighborhood. Articles were written, social media buzzed, and community leaders spoke of the incident as a teaching moment. But for Jasmine, the most meaningful impact was quiet, personal, lasting. She had reclaimed her space, asserted her dignity, and reminded herself and everyone around her of the power of standing firm in one's truth. Her relationship with her neighbors gradually shifted. Many reached out to apologize for past indifference, for not speaking up sooner. Some sought guidance on confronting bias in their own lives. Jasmine welcomed these gestures, not with bitterness, but with the grace of someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. And while Karen remained a presence in the neighborhood, her attempts to control or intimidate no longer carried weight. Jasmine's courage had dismantled the illusion of authority that had once seemed unassailable. What had begun as an ordinary day and ordinary driveway confrontation had transformed into a defining moment.
Ow.
One that would resonate in the community for years to come. Jasmine Moore stood tall in her home, the sunlight spilling across the living room as Malik played in the yard. She had faced the storm, and in doing so, she had demonstrated that dignity, justice, and courage are not abstract ideals. They are lived, embodied, and defended. Her story was now part of the larger tapestry of Black resilience, a narrative of triumph in the face of prejudice, and a testament to the enduring strength of a woman who refused to be moved from her rightful place. In the end, it wasn't about winning against Karen, or even against the HOA. It was about winning for herself, for Malik, and for every person who needed to see that standing firm in one's truth can change not only lives but entire communities. Jasmine had turned confrontation into empowerment, fear into courage, and injustice into a story of enduring hope and dignity. And that, more than anything, was truly unbelievable.